Hello, everyone. There we go. Hello, everyone. This is Abhijat Saraswat, and this is Fringe Legal Edge. For those of you joining us for the first time, this is a experimental weekly show where I speak with experts and leaders about things that will hope to give your practice an edge. And practice could mean absolutely anything. It could be personal, it could be something professional, ideally both. And with me today, I've got Amaranatho, and we're going to have a great conversation. Before we jump in, I wanted to introduce Amaranatho very briefly. I certainly want him to explore and expand more on his story because he's had a very interesting story. He started his life working as a technical support manager and then took him on a transformational journey from getting a degree in AI. He became a world explorer and spent 15 years being a monk. He spent a long period of time being alone in isolation and dealing with uncertainty. And now the next chapter, I suppose, for him, or the current chapter is he is a mindfulness-based executive coach. He is an agile mindset coach, a scrum master, and he supports executives and leaders within companies in how to work through complex situations. And actually, in posting about this very recently, about half an hour ago on LinkedIn, one of the things that we'll certainly dig in that's topical for me today is the difference between complexity and chaos. But I digress. Before that, Amaranatho, thank you for joining me today.
Oh, lovely to be here. Yeah, it's great.
So you've had quite a story to get to this point. If you wouldn't mind expanding a little bit about your journey so far. So you went from a pretty technical point of view to
Yes.
perhaps technical in other ways,
Yes.
and now helping others sort of work through complex situations. Or
Yes.
what's that journey been like for you?
So I guess it's an inner journey. So in order to study AI, you actually have to look at how the mind works. You have to look at linguistics, psychology, cognitive science. And so when I started off, actually, I didn't really understand very much about emotions. You know, I was a tech guy and I knew about parallel processing and programming and all of the rest of it.
Sure.
But I ended up in AI and it sort of just kept me going. And I started this reflective process, this inquiry, it just grabbed me, and it grabbed me and it grabbed me and it grabbed me. And then I left university and I didn't want to go back straight into the computer industry. So actually I ended up in America working in neuroscience whilst I was traveling. And as I kept traveling, the inward journey just got stronger and stronger and stronger. And, you know, one of those things that you do when you're traveling is you think, well, I'll do bungee jumping, I'll do meditation. So I did my meditation and suddenly it all started to click together. And it was so strong at the end of this very hardcore 10-day meditation course that actually I wanted to become a monk. And that there was a clarity there. So I you know, it's not a thing that you just think, well, I'm going to do it. So I took a few years to settle into it, but actually I couldn't stop it. I was grabbed by my hair and said, go here. So I ended up in a monastery in England near Heathrow Airport. And again, this journey just kept going in and in and in and in and in. And then it goes out. So actually I started serving people in the monastery. I started running these very innovative family camps, with young people and families and intergenerational stuff. And then then I started running with teenagers, and then the parents got jealous of the teenagers. Can I run adult retreats? And so it went on. Yeah. And then you need a whole load of skills. And I started again developing myself internally. And then I got to the limit of what I could do in the monastery, and I felt I should be freelance. So I started traveling around the world to test what I could do. And again, then I've done lots of retreats, silent retreats, like 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. And I was on another 3-month retreat in Australia where I was living for the time as a monk. And again, this moment of clarity came up and it said, stop being a monk. And I was in a very good situation. I had everything I wanted, actually. There was nothing I needed anymore, but this clarity came up and I've always trusted this.
Yeah.
And that's what I had to follow. So I stopped being a monk. That was 5 years ago. And so with that intention, I came back to England. And then the world pulled me to the Netherlands, where I live now. And I started again. And I felt, well, so what can I do with my background? How can I help people? You know, I've got all this experience, dealt with complexity, a lot of complexity, both inner and outer, right. Running large events, and also my own complexity of trying to understand myself. How do I work? And I thought, so what can I do? How can I have social impact? And that's how the mindfulness-based executive coaching came about. And then living in the Netherlands, I suddenly found out about Agile. You can imagine I've not been really in the world that much, not in the tech world anyway, not for a long time.
Sure.
And so that's how I got to this place, really. Yeah, it's been quite a journey.
Yeah, certainly. And that's just the 3-minute view of that. So I'm sure we can dig into that a lot more. But I know you've previously spoken about parts of that journey. So instead of repeating some of that, I'll certainly direct people to look into that and certainly find you elsewhere on the internet. What was really interesting as you were talking, I didn't know there was such a thing as a freelance monk. So that's certainly something I've learned already. And the second, I was thinking through, and you were on towards the end of the previous session that Matt Miller and Theo Lissa were presenting on Litera TV. And Theo said something towards the end around, he was talking about Tesla, but and Elon Musk around making impact in terms of magnitude improvements, right? Yes. And you, as one thinks about how do you not just make incremental improvements or changes in the world, but you go out there, and certainly for the leaders and the executives, you think about things in the orders of magnitude, the sizable impact will be, and connecting that to something you said about testing what you can do, right? Having that point of self-reflection becomes so important, and I'm sure you went through that yourself as you go from one journey, one point of view to another. So yeah, that was quite interesting, and I think so.
Could I answer that?
Yeah, please go for it.
I actually also was listening, and I heard that point, and the point that came to my mind was actually emotional intelligence. Matt said he had high emotional intelligence, and that's the big crux of it, because when you've got emotional intelligence, you can turn around any negative into a positive. And this idea of actually stepping out, I took a huge step. When I joined the monastery, I gave up everything. I cut my credit card. There was no, everything went. I had very little possessions. And then when I came out, I had to do the same thing again. You step out. Right. And so there's that magnitude is ginormous. I didn't know even prices in supermarkets or nothing. Right. I hadn't been to the cinema in 20 years. I didn't even know what a big screen looked like.
Sure.
But the thing is when you've got this emotional intelligence and you can deal with complexity, these situations are just another thing that you can do. And that magnitude you can just step into. Like Pete, I mean, I know COVID has been a very stressful event for a lot of people. But for me, it's like, oh, it's interesting. You're coming to my side of the fence now. This is great. I've been in solitude. I get it's difficult in flats, and I'm not trying to, but on the whole, and the clients that I've been coaching, we've not been doing about stress. We've actually been doing about how do we do innovative things. Because their stress levels are already down. They know how to deal with the complexities. And that's actually where you do get ginormous jumps. And also we've seen it in society. Societies have made a massive jump now. And that's a very interesting reflection point. And as a monk, you develop that reflection all the time. And that's the number one tool for any executive. If you're not able to step back from the situation, you can't get clarity. You're going to follow basically your old habit, the way that it's always been. And then that's it.
Yeah, and I mean, there's so many avenues there, because the reflection is critical, as you say, and self-awareness is critical, and not just for all the reasons that you've talked about, but if you think about it from almost any perspective. So think about it from the perspective of a technologist, right? You mentioned that you studied AI. One of the fundamental things of creating AI-based system, depending on what you're doing, I guess. So let's assume you're creating a ML machine learning system, is to understand how you are thinking as a developer, as a technologist, so you don't introduce your own bias, right? It's a very topical thing today, because Google, Amazon, and others are reflecting on this now, and seeing what kind of biases they may inadvertently introduce into these systems. That's because ultimately it is human beings that are creating these systems, and understanding what biases you may hold is critical in ensuring that you don't follow through, or at least you create checks and balances against that.
Exactly. Yeah, and mindfulness and being self-aware is one of the most powerful ways to actually be aware of bias.
Yeah.
It's not that you're going to have the long list and you're going to tick them off and you're going to, oh yeah, I've done this one and this one.
Yeah.
There's so many of them.
Yeah.
But this ability to bring it up front and square and see, and then step back from that, that's a superpower. You know, I've got plenty of biases. I could rattle them off.
Yeah.
But whether I choose to act on them and follow them through is something very different.
Yeah. And I'm a big anyone who knows me, I'm a big fan of sort of Stoic philosophy and understanding that, look, things happen all around you. The only thing that you can really control is how you react to something. The moment you sort of learn to deal with it in that way, to say, look, that person may annoy me, this period may annoy me, but how much control do I really have over someone else or the world? You may have influence in some instances, but really it's about how you react to it. That's important. And I do want to use the time to sort of segue into mindfulness. So firstly, let's get the elephant out of the room and out of the room, and say, okay, some people I'm sure will be thinking mindfulness and all of these things are a bit woo-woo, right? So I'm obviously not one of those people, hence we're speaking. But where do you think, as you work with leaders and executives, I know you worked with legal professionals also, where do you think they see the biggest benefit and the impact of being more aware? Where does this kind of stuff relate to in terms of practicalities, right? On a day-to-day basis, what is the connection? And it could be, for me, it's about being more being a better communicator. It's about managing change, which is absolutely key, both now and really forever, and becoming a better leader, right? And many of these things sort of come into that.
I guess, when I reflect and look at the legal profession, it's a thinking profession, right? And if you just follow the thinking process, that actually leads to burnout. So the mindfulness is really the ability to notice your thinking process, and that it's something actually wider, that your thinking process is connected to your body. And the word that's used in psychology now is somatic. That our thinking process is not just in our head, it's in our bodies. And when these two things are connected together, that's where you feel the force, and that's where you can step back. So the client that I was coaching, one of the things was how much load of material he has to digest. I mean, like, he's a super detective. Really, put all this thing, make it concise, but then not have any break, and do the next one, and do the next one, and then wondering why he's stressed, right? There's no break. No athlete does that. There's not one athlete on the planet that works in that way, right? They always pace themselves. There's these studies done with SAS soldiers about testosterone level, very high in the beginning. They go on a mission, they come back, it's wiped. They have a rest. And so it's really important to be somatically aware so that you can manage your energies. And when you manage your energies, of course, you can get high peak performance. I mean, that's not the only thing. You've got emotional intelligence, the way that you speak to your clients, how you communicate your position, and how you can relate to them through empathy and compassion. And then the other side of it is compassion fatigue, which is actually in some legal professions, you're listening to so much difficult stuff, that if you were in any other profession, you would be having supervision,
right?
You would be having help. You would be saying, I've had this going on, and it just builds up. And again, that reflective step back process. So this is science. This is no longer woo woo. If you look up some of Porges, the polyvagal theory, right? It's just massively influential on the way that we are as human beings, right? And so the science is there now. Maybe 15 years ago, you could quite easily say woo-woo, and you could say, well, there isn't any. I'm not 100% sure about MRI scans and all this type of stuff. And I also don't believe mindfulness is an independent activity. Mindfulness is a relational activity, and it appears in relationships. I've spent a lot of time alone, I get that, but it's really a relational activity, and it comes with a whole load of ethics in the end. And one has you have to bridge that at some point. This morning I was coaching somebody else, and they're in a very difficult situation where they're working. Their leader has put them in a position where they might have to take them to court. Actually, right. Interestingly, this morning, but it's what arose.
Yeah.
And there's and for me as a coach, there's that ethical thing. So what is the wider context?
Yeah.
And the more that you've got that awareness, you can start to choose, well, actually, yes, I will do something about it because actually I feel empowered, rather than I'm exhausted and I can't do anything and I'm trapped. It's the same Stoic response, because these things are universal. The box is irrelevant to me. It's about, we've all got a body, right? We've all got a pair of lungs, and if we work from that basis, then we can work with that.
Yeah.
There's cultural influences, of course there are.
Yeah, and I think that's so important. And some of the things I wrote down as you're talking is, of course, there is the importance of empathy. I think that was a repeating pattern in what you were saying, right?
Yes.
And I think and whether it's being empathetic when you're speaking to others, when you're writing an email, or when you're responding, or when you're, not even responding, when you're reacting to an email or a call or something that you may have received, thinking this sounds a bit terse, right?
Yes.
Pausing and thinking, okay, what may be going on here? Why might they be responding in such a way?
Yes.
That's so important. And then the other thing is sort of exploring the structures and the flows of both your teams and the relationships around you, both personally and professionally, because I think that leads to a more fluid dynamic, and certainly within teams. And you talked about sort of agile and Scrum. I think it's important to create that level of fluidity where there can be resistance. Absolutely, there should be people challenging your views and thoughts.
Oh yes,
but it should happen in a fluid way where you can continue moving ahead at the same pace and towards an agreed and hopefully a better goalpost at the end.
Yes, agreed. And actually, that I don't know Tesla that well, but from what I've read, that's what he asks of his workforce: challenge me, send me an email, and let's discuss it. That's something from a leadership point of view to do that. And it's what I've done in my own events as well. When I was running these large family camps, it was an open invitation for negativity, right? To say whatever's on it, and then to bring it into the group and to resolve it on a mature level, with immature emotions. Because that sometimes happens.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess certainly the thing I hadn't really thought about, honestly, was around compassion fatigue. And I know individuals who work in fields like this, who are doctors, who are in the legal profession and are working within family law or criminal law. And as you said, the types of things they would be hearing, and multiple times a day, that you do both need to have slightly hardened skill and in some cases a strong stomach, but also there needs to be a point where you need to decompress, where you need to have this point of reflection. And I love the analogy that you made to an athlete. I'm a big fan of this. Sort of just talking about, look, you have to sort of think of all of this as, if you want to have peak performance, then train like an athlete. An athlete, yes, it is generally in sports, but the principles very much apply to professional realm as well. Right? And you need to taper your training. And you have to train for these things, right? None of these things are natural. Even if you have natural ability as an athlete, you still train to bring and harness that into a controlled way.
Exactly. And one of the interesting things I did when I was a monk, and it's part of my brand now, PlayfulMonk is my brand.
Sure.
But I actually developed this thing when I was a monk called the Playful Monk Experience.
Right.
And I went in and lived in a hospital in Australia for a week. I actually lived in the hospital. They gave me a room on a ward. And I trained the staff there, the doctors, on compassion fatigue, trauma, mental health, mindfulness, community building, right? And during my research, what I found out was the highest suicide rate outside the general population is with junior doctors.
Wow.
I couldn't believe it. I was totally shocked, So, even on the professional level, this language hasn't, it's just seeping in now, it's trauma informed, it's called, and it's just so important, this sense of what you said, decompressing, giving yourself time. And of course, as a monk, you have to, I had to do the same thing. And the same when I'm coaching now, I have a supervisor for the same reason. And I'm training to be a coaching supervisor now as well myself, just how important that peer group support is, so you're a supervisor, but you also need supervision,
right.
because you're listening even to more stories, you're not just dealing with your clients, you're dealing with, maybe 10 other coaches and their clients. And that's a lot of people to hold. And that's the same thing in a leadership position. You're not just thinking about yourself, you're holding a vision, and that's complexity, you see.
And I guess the not always, but certainly in most instances, the more senior you become, so as you go from a manager to a leader to an executive, the smaller that support pool becomes, right? Because there's less individuals within certainly your company that you can speak to, and it becomes more important to develop a wider peer group.
Absolutely. It's fantastic you said that, because I was on LinkedIn this morning, and there was this article from, I think from INSEAD, about these different types of leaders that are emerging during this time.
Sure.
But the one thing that the article lacked was, it said nothing about collaboration. It said said very little about connection. It said relationship with your family but it didn't say your peer group. It didn't say other people. I find that shocking. And the science is connection, right? That if you want to deal with stress, Kelly McGonigal is a stress researcher. Her number one thing is to reduce stress is connection. Right.
And that's so important, because and again, some of these things are blindingly obvious, so much so that people often take it for granted, right? Connection, I think people understand and value the need for connection. And by the way, connection could just mean just listening to someone, just being there as a non-active participant, right? That's fine as well. But actually being part of being connected to another or a group means that you also get to listen to and have some comfort in, I'm not the only one going through this, or someone has done this before, and what did they learn? How can you go from that? And actually, I'm conscious of time. We have about 8 minutes left. So one of the things I wanted to talk about as well, this is personal to me.
No problem.
I'll be absolutely selfish.
That's all right. It's great fun.
As we think, and as I've been thinking about this a little bit, so mindfulness is important, reflecting is important, self-awareness is important. But one of the things that certainly, and I'm going to make this very specific to the tech space, there is a deluge of data and information one has to actually intake, analyze, and then provide some sort of insight from. And often people talk about things and use the synonym of chaos and complexity. To me, they're very different.
They are.
What's your view? To you, what's the difference between the two, and how do you deal with managing stress?
Thank you. So I like David Snowden's work, Professor David Snowden, and he invented the Cynefin framework. And there's a very big difference between complexity and chaos. And chaos is usually just firefighting, right? And that's mainly what I see in leadership circles. It's all firefighting, right? Now the complexity realm, you can't control it. It's impossible to control. So if you think of any situation where you can't control it, in a way, that's a complex realm, which is actually pretty much most of life in a way. But the way of dealing with complexity is to see the whole system. Right. So how can you see the whole system if you can't see the whole of yourself? So this is why the inside work is so important for the outside work. Your ability to listen to a system and see what's happening, either as the big things, the things that you kind of get attracted to, or the weak signals, the low ones, because you might want to bring them up. They might be really important. Right? Dave Snowden talks about the terrorist. If you can get a weak signal and amplify that up, you might be able to protect somebody's life. Right? So the ability and mindfulness actually allows you to stay with the whole system. What you can do is you can step back and observe complexity. Right. If you go one level down, that's the complicated realm, right? That's the level of consultants and people advisors. And if you go one level down, that's simple. That's the industry line, the assembly line. Yeah, just very simple. Do A, do B, do C.
Yeah.
But you can see most of our world nowadays is just very much placed in the complexity. And you can't use the thinking of the simple realm in the complexity. It just doesn't work. The world of complexity doesn't go A, B, C. Right. Look at your own emotions. Do they go A, B, C? Do they say, I'm feeling good and then bad and then they don't do that? They're all over the place. It's the beauty of working with kids.
Yeah.
Right. Play is actually about bringing the innocence and the creativity of the child, and then the monk part is that insight, that mindset together. So playful monk is those two things together, and then that's what gives you the ability to deal with and stay with complexity. Yeah. And all you're doing is your listening is very deep and actually quite quiet. You see, if we just go quiet, and we just listen in there. See, it's so simple. When you just bring attention to our bodies, to the breath, to the present moment, here it is. And then you've got a choice. Do you speak or not speak? Do you engage or not engage? And that's all it is. And you can get distracted by outliners and things and pulled out, but the job is to stay present. And through that presence, you get impact. You get massive impact.
Very good.
It's interesting when we delve into silence, isn't it? What happens to the space? You see, there's a tonality of it, even across time and space. We're in two different countries, and we pay attention to silence, and it comes in the room. And then we can attend actually to what is happening, what is really happening. And it's not what we think, what we want to happen, none of those things, but actually what is happening. That's the agile mindset, that's agility. And as you can see what's happening right now in the world, all the companies are moving towards this because they have to. They've got no more options left. But if you come in with a fixed mindset, you come in with the ABC approach, you're going to have a lot of suffering.
Yeah. No, and that's just, I think the last 2 minutes, that exercise is so useful, and
yes,
it's great actually. That gave me a lot to think about and a lot to reflect on, because I've spent the week learning about complex systems, because as you said, most systems are complex systems, but more specifically the interrelationships between complex systems and topics as you try, because on first glance most complex systems look chaotic to one, right? So how do you translate that chaos into something more manageable to say, okay, this is simply complexity, and then managing that? Because I think at least for me, in reducing stress, it's very much about being able to focus on the right thing, and as you said, in that moment of silence and reflection, being present.
Right. So the right thing is presence.
Yeah.
And everything else is a distraction.
Yeah.
And the chaotic systems always go back to they cycle between complex systems cycle between chaos and order. And that's what we're always dealing with. We're always doing with this. Oh, it's all going all really right. Bam! Hey, we're back into chaos.
Yeah.
Right. But there's a trust element in there. You see, can you trust the system? Can you trust what's going on in front of you? Yeah. And then see how you manage it, not how you manage the system, but how you manage it.
Yeah.
Right. And how much trust can you give to your colleagues, your peers, your groups, as an executive, as a leader, manager, HR person? How much trust can you give, and how much can you personally hold yourself? I mean, not physically hold, but be spacious to.
Yeah. Perfect. And so we have about 60 seconds left. I certainly want an opportunity for people, if they're interested in learning more and getting in touch, for you to sort of point them in the right direction.
Okay.
And then to wrap up, if you had one ask as people enter into the weekend across the world, what's one or two things that you'd want to sort of impart as a takeaway?
Great. So what I would say, you can find me at www.playfulmonk.net. Or you can find me on LinkedIn through Amaranatho. It's probably easier through Playful Monk, although my name's on. And then what I would really request for the weekend is that you take rest. that you really nourish yourself, and you nourish yourself through kindness. And that kindness can be internally. And when you feel that you've got enough of it, do it for somebody else without any need for anything back. And that doesn't have to be money. It can be a smile. It can be a look. It can be anything that you like. And in that way, we can engage with others, and we can see how it is to be with other people. And it's through rest and nourishment and kindness.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. That's a great message. And thank you everyone for watching, whether you're watching live or later on. My name is Abhijat Saraswat, and this was Fringe Legal Edge on Litera TV. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.